Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, today, and thanks for Dr. Greger for taking the time. So, for those of you listening in or watching, Dr. Greger is an absolute legend in the field of plant-based nutrition. He has a 3 times New York Times bestseller, How Not to Die, probably the book that changed my entire life, and maybe the best resource out there for plant-based nutrition on nutritionfacts.org. Um, Founding member of American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I could go on and on. I'm sure he would love to hear me keep gushing over him. But we're excited to have him today and go through and ask some questions. With me today, I got my business partner, Chase. We're the founding members of Whole Health Club, the Gym with the Kitchen, where we teach people plant-based. So should be a fun conversation today. And Chase, I'll kind of let you kick it off, and we can get Dr. Greger's thoughts on some things.
Yeah, so I think my first question is, going from a practicing, doctor, what was like that moment of clarity or that moment where you're like, I need to stop this and I need to go and I need to educate the public on what actual nutrition is, and how it, can actually impact lives. Like, how do you go from that to the extreme of, I'm leaving my cushy job where, people respect this and don't call me, all these crazy names and stuff. Yeah, talk me through that.
I came into medicine
Okay.
with that goal in mind. It all started
Okay.
for me actually when I was just a kid. My grandmother is really the reason why I do what I do. She was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease, sent home to die. She already had so many bypass surgeries, basically run out of plumbing at some point, confined to a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. There was nothing more they could do. Her life was over at age 65. But then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. He talks about Frances Greger, my grandmother. They wheeled her in and she walked out. So she was given her medical death sentence at age 65, thanks to a healthy diet. Was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet until age 96 to continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. That's why I practice lifestyle medicine, why I started Nutrition Facts, why I wrote How Not to Die, why all the proceeds from all my books are donated directly to charity. I just want to do for everyone's family what Pritikin did for my family.
I love that. And with that, I mean, my story kind of is similar. My grandma started having heart surgeries at the age of 75, had 5 open heart surgeries. She didn't get the care or the adjustments, so she had 5 open heart surgeries, still lived to 93, but it was a much different, last 20 years or 18 years. So I guess, I mean, that's one of my drivers, cancer on the other side of my family. So like, do you think, in your opinion, it almost has to be like a traumatic moment like that for people? Or do you think there's a way to like kind of create that moment, I don't know, maybe more artificially or earlier without having to go through something like that?
Yeah, really, it really shouldn't have to be, right? Yeah. By now we have this tremendous mountain of evidence and we can use reason rather than emotion to take us down this path. It's interesting when I go to these plant-based nutrition and healthcare conferences, and I sit down with people and ask, how did you get involved? Like, the same question you asked me, like, wait a second, like, you certainly didn't learn about this in medical school. Like, how did, and interesting, usually it's actually a patient. A patient came to them, who they'd known for a long time, something like type 2 diabetes, and they were just getting worse, and then they die. Like that's what happens. And then you can slow down the rate at which they go blind and, lose their kidney function and get their lower limbs amputated. But, unless you treat the cause, you're not going to reverse the disease. And then all of a sudden they come back and, they're way over medicated. They lost all this weight. You got to pull back the insulin, or you got to take them off their blood pressure medications. And they're like, oh my God, like what happened? Like, and they're like, oh, I, saw the Game Changers or Forks Over Knives or read the China Study or something. And, and they're like, what? In the back of their mind, the doctor's thinking, wait a second, I've got like thousands of patients just like you.
Yeah.
And so, ironically, it's kind of like the patient teaching the doctor. Though, for me, hearing that story is kind of frustrating because it's like, wait a second, I've been presenting you with like stacks of studies like this high and like one little anecdote, and all of a sudden you're changing your whole life. Wait a second, what the hell?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's who we are. We're kind of storied creatures. We just kind of, that what guides a lot of our behavior. But I mean, if you just stand back and let your rational mind take over, I mean, the science is really clear.
Yeah. And that's funny that you say that. We always say that about like when Game Changers came out and some of those awesome movies. You're like, I've been barking about this for 12 years now. And one movie comes out and you're like, hey, did you know this?
Right.
So yeah, that's always cracks me up. So given the videos and the mountain of evidence you're talking about, how long have you been creating the videos specifically, and like why kind of that medium?
Yeah, so 2011 is when Nutrition Facts got born. So yeah, we're going on a dozen years now. Well, I mean, originally it started with me just traveling around the country, speaking at medical schools mostly. But it's like, because like how many people could I really reach in a day in primary care practice? How many, no matter how many people I see in an hour, it's like, it's like this kind of life-changing, life-saving information needs to get out as widely as possible. So I went on the road thinking, well, I'll teach a whole new generation of doctors to like teach their patients, kind of like train the trainer kind of thing. But like still, like I'm reaching hundreds of people a day.
Yeah.
And so then I started, well, I'll make DVDs with my talks and send those out. Actually, it was so far back I was making VHS. Like we're talking this is old school,
Oh yeah.
Wasn't quite Betamax, but it was and so then I could like reach thousands of people a day, but the only way you reach millions these days, right, is like basically, kind of mainstream TV or online. And so basically I just put all my content online that was already on the DVDs and then just started making content, and now reaching millions of people a month. And so I mean that's I mean I missed that kind of one-on-one with my patients, but it's I feel like I'm like practicing medicine on a kind of larger scale now.
Yeah, the impact can be much bigger.
Macro medicine.
Obviously, I actually switched to a plant-based diet in 2011 as well, so kind of good timing. But I'd like to hear kind of your opinion of the shift in culture, or the shift in like people adopting a plant-based diet since you started. Like, did it feel like a really big uphill battle? Does it feel like it's easier now or still an uphill?
It's ridiculous. You kids these days, I tell you got it easy. I mean, I mean, Jesus, look at the dairy case these days, right? I mean, it's like, what? I mean, things have changed. In fact, one little data point as to how far we've come. Last month, New York City, all 11 New York City public health hospitals made plant-based meals the default option. And so that now look, I mean, healthy meals in a hospital, like what a concept, right? I mean, and like patients can still go out of their way and order meat if they want to, but about 60% have been sticking to the vegan options. And so that's like 1 million meals a year in New York City hospitals. And so it's like, do you live in a city? Like, why not lobby your own local hospitals to follow New York City's shining example? I mean, it's like, but it just shows, wow. And, it's ironic. I remember talking, so Eric Adams is a plant-based mayor in New York. And, I'm talking to his team and they're like all disappointed that it didn't get more press. Like, I mean, this is huge. Like, plant-based meals default all hospitals. And I think that the fact that it didn't get a lot of press, that was just like, oh yeah, healthy meals in hospitals, duh. Like, is that even a story?
Right.
The fact that it was just like, oh yeah, they're vegan, 1 million vegan meals to a hospital pay. Like, it was just like, yeah, okay. Like, it didn't even, there wasn't even controversy. There wasn't even, Whereas, you go back, a decade, and I remember the USDA, just to their internal employee list, sent out a like consider Meatless Monday to help the environment or something, right? And there was this like national firestorm, even suggesting people go one day without meat. That within hours it was taken down. It was like a big controversy. Like, so there's been so much shift.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me think, a lot on that there wasn't a lot of news coverage, which to me, can be a double-edged sword. It's really cool that it's been normalized, but almost a lot of times another good book I've read, 48 Laws of Power, court attention at all costs. And so having that large controversy, do you feel like because things only seem to get picked up in the news when it's controversial, do you feel like that's a roadblock to expanding the plant-based movement in the health fields? And if not, what do you feel is the biggest roadblock?
Well, they certainly, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing gives us really a skewed sense of what's happening in the world. You see that mostly with like crime statistics, like, you go on local news, like half of it is talking about crime. And even over the last few decades, crime's been kind of consistently going down, but you ask people and they're just like, the more they watch local news, the more they're freaked out about, crime. But that's how they get people to watch their station. So, you do see that there is kind of this biasing effect. And yeah, like this, just recently, like the tomato soup protest, right? They sprayed tomato soup on like Van Gogh's sunflowers or something, right? Yeah. And, you can imagine people being like, oh, you're making the cause look bad. And it's like, oh my God. But it's like, what kind of coverage did that get versus the day before when the climate was just as bad, but it was completely nowhere to be found, right?
Right.
And, they're basically, and, there was glass covering it and like nothing really got hurt. But like millions of people heard this message being like, what do we care more about here? Like, this is like serious situation. And so, it's just interesting to, but obviously the media coverage pushes people to do those kind of more extreme things. It'd be nice. We could all just write letters and the world changes. But there are these powerful corporate interests, whether it's the petroleum industry, whether it's big pharma, whether it's the livestock industries, whether it's processed food industry, that, they're just throwing cash at our legislators. And so, a letter ain't going to do it. It's going to require a tremendous amount of pressure, but that's what we're seeing all over the country is this real grassroots movement to just like make like basic, simple, logical, like, healthy meals in the hospital. Like, just like the low hanging fruit kind of stuff. Look, you want progress. I hear there's a plant-based gym in the world. Come on.
Heck yeah. Well, we gotta build it up, right? So we can help the financial side of getting this movement out. And I'm glad you actually brought that up because, this is I guess maybe a thought experiment. I think I know maybe a little bit why now at this point, but something that's always been curious to me is like, we always mention it, like, look, there's big pharma, there's large dairy, there's large meat corporations, and clearly they're spending, money hand over fist to make sure, we're either slowing the transition to a plant-based national diet or structured around that. But I'm just always curious, like, why do we think there hasn't been a plant-based industry that could gain that financial power when it is the right answer for these things, as opposed to, like meat and dairies and things that are actually not doing benefiting our society? Why doesn't Big Broccoli have a large fund? Why doesn't the Fruit Coalition have those money? Where do you think that disconnect's been, or why they're not profitable to the point of being able to lobby in the same way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? There's lots of corporations selling good stuff, and why aren't they using their profits to make people healthier? The issue is that, unfortunately, healthy food is almost by definition less profitable, right? So take produce, for example. Produce goes bad. It's like the worst possible thing to sell. Literally, it rots on your freaking shelf, right? It's hard to transport. What you want is a snack cake that sits on the shelf for a couple of weeks, totally fine, right? And it's all dirt cheap ingredients, which are subsidized, like the sugar industry, the corn industry, subsidized by taxpayers. How about selling, brown sugar water in a can? For like a couple bucks a bottle? How much did the ingredients cost for that? Like 2 pennies? It's all profit, right? Yeah. Broccoli people, and look, you can't even advertise your broccoli because there's no brand name attached. Someone would just go buy your competitor's broccoli. You're never going to see an ad on the Super Bowl for sweet potatoes. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, so the system is just set up. It's not like the CEO of Coca-Cola is sitting there, rubbing their sticky hands together thinking, how can I contribute to the childhood obesity epidemic, right? It's just they need quarterly returns for their shareholders, right? And where's the profit, right? Yeah. They couldn't go in a healthy direction if they wanted. They'd be kicked on their ass and they bring in somebody else because it's just a profit generating machine. Consequences be damned, right? Yeah. And so they got all this money, right? Yeah. I mean, so they just got like, wow, we got billion, like the processed food industry, $1 trillion industry. Oh my God. They got the money to line people's pockets. And unfortunately, the broccoli people are just struggling to get some food to your shelves.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to look at it. From that perspective, it's not that, the people from Coca-Cola or the processed foods are actively promoting obesity. They're just actively promoting the profits of their company, to make that happen. And I think putting it that way is super good. And something we always teach is,
I mean, it's no conspiracy. It's literally just how the system works. Like the system is just set up to reward profitable companies. And so that's what, regulators are around for, but it's just like, but it's not even like equal. It's not even like even competition because of the taxpayer subsidies. Is taxpayer, there's billions of dollars going to artificially make meat cheap for dollar menu burgers, right? Mm-hmm. Why, if we're gonna, now you can argue taxpayers shouldn't be like giving handouts to any kind of companies, but if you are going to, why not do it that actually aligns with the healthier citizenry? Like, let's make fruits and vegetables cheaper. Yeah, how about free fruits and vegetables? How about literally you go and you just subsidize the apple farmers and you want an apple, you get an apple, boom, so it's not even because, they get all this money to make artificially cheap, feedstuffs for the livestock industries. And so it's just the system is set up to make people sick. And so we have to take responsibility for our own lives, for our own families' lives. We can't wait until society catches up to the science, because it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah, we got to push the needle, and I mean, I'm waiting for that day, and maybe we'll lobby our way there where we can get subsidized fruits and vegetables, and it makes a lot more sense in my brain to subsidize the not exceptionally profitable companies versus subsidizing companies that are making billions of dollars a quarter. But that brings up a good point, because I do when you said, hey, why don't we subsidize the healthy food? And in our industry, being in fitness and in this, I believe we're in the fad diet mecca industry. In our industry, it is a constant moving needle of this. And something I've been seeing lately, and with doctors promoting it, and I know doctors get this put on this revered scale, and they're always right, and I know they're also just humans as well. So, and unfortunately, not a lot of nutrition, which I learned from your book, that is taught in those schools. But one thing that I've been seeing a lot, and I really just want to put this to rest, and so I'm glad I get to talk to an expert and see if I'm wrong, but I see a lot of this anti-nutrient stuff out there recently, and what that's turning into is this new fad of what's called an animal-based diet, where it's grass-fed meats, raw dairies, honey, and fruits. But for some reason, vegetables are damaging to us, and I would honestly just like to get your thoughts on that new wave, because it's a very big trend on social media in our space. I'm very curious on your thoughts of how that got out there and why there's this discrepancy on what is a healthy diet.
Yeah, well, I mean, diets always sell because diets always fail, right? So you always need a new one to whip out, right? But as to why this particular fad, I mean, people like to hear good news about their bad habits, right? And so no one wants to be told to eat broccoli, right? How many books are you going to sell? You put broccoli on the cover, right? How many books are you going to sell if you put bacon on the cover, right? I mean, it really comes down to that. And, there's this contrarian controversy, you get those links, if study comes out saying broccoli is good, there's not going to be a headline, right? Come out and say, oh, eat some butter today. Oh my God, that's going to get a headline, right? And so And look, it's so telling people, oh, you can have all the, whatever, heavy cream you want or whatever. I mean, who wouldn't want to get that kind of message, right? And if of all plants, fruit, hey, I mean, bananas, I mean, so it's like, that may be part of it, but of course, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? The healthiest foods are vegetables. Vegetables have more nutrient density than any other food on the planet. And so, I mean, I think that's a good kind of test. I mean, the most uncontroversial statement in the field of nutrition going back decades is eat more fruits and vegetables. I mean, it's just, which is basically saying eat more plants, right? Fruit are fruit, right. And vegetables are any other part of the food or part of the plant that isn't a fruit. So there's root vegetables, stem vegetables like celery, there's flower vegetables like cauliflower, there's leafy vegetables. And so basically the most uncontroversial thing in all of nutrition is eat more plants, right? Okay. So any diet that says eat fewer plants, right? I mean, then already you've lost. I mean, it's like it just doesn't pass the whiff test, right? Mm-hmm. Any diet that says don't eat fruits or vegetables is, flat earth theory territory, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, well, you've completely given up any right to say that there's any kind of evidence, or, I mean, you're just off the reservation at that point. And look, you want to eat away. I mean, you say, well, wait a second. Well, I mean, who cares? I mean, people should be able to eat however they want. Okay, that's fine, as long as people are informed to the predictable consequences of their actions. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure these diet people aren't saying, okay, now this is going to kill you, by the way, but you should eat this way, right? I mean, they're implicitly or explicitly suggesting this is a healthy way to eat. And if diet wasn't the number one killer of Americans and around most of the Western world, well, then who cares what people do? But we're talking the most important decision that you make in your day-to-day lives as to how long and how healthy you're going to live is what we eat 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. And so if there's any decision to be made based on evidence, it should be what we eat.
So what I'm hearing real quick there, Chase, is if somebody is touting a diet where they're telling you to minimize your fruit and vegetable intake or not consume them at all, they should not be lent credibility because they have not done enough research in the field of nutrition to understand the whole, right? I just want to make sure that's what I'm hearing.
Not even enough. They've done no research. I mean, they just cannot pretend that they're making a statement based on reality. That's what science is. Science is reality, or at least our best approximation of it. And so, I mean, basically anyone, right. So anyone comes to you with a diet that then you can instantly dismiss it, right? Yeah. But as far as I'm concerned, someone comes to you with a diet that hasn't been proven to reverse heart disease, the number one killer of men and women. I think that's enough, right? There's only one diet ever proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, plant-based diet, right? Yep. So start it's there. Like, do me a favor. Anyone tries to sell you on some new diet, say, wait a second. Like, does this diet been proven to reverse heart disease? Number one reason me and all my loved ones will die. The answer is no. Like, why would you even consider it? Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse our number one killer, shouldn't that be kind of the default diet and proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also be so effective in preventing, arresting, reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming.
So to kind of transition into a few other questions along that lines is, so what we're hearing is like you said, a lot of people don't like to be, reminded of their mistakes or what they're doing wrong. So they'll kind of adopt this. So do you think that it's behavior change is the missing piece? And if not, what do we ever think that plant-based can catch a wave like say a paleo did or a keto did and actually, permeate throughout our culture at a large scale?
I mean, it's just the information. I mean, I have this kind of naive, and it may be a naive thought that eventually the truth kind of bubbles to the surface, right? I mean, the truth wins out in the end. I mean, yes, I mean, you can spend all this money saying drink Coca-Cola, and the reason they have to spend so much money, and McDonald's has spent so much money, because the truth is not on their side. I mean, they really have to, like, convince people to eat candy and all these things that are bad for them. But I mean, for us, I mean, you just assume the truth is eventually going to win out. Now, unfortunately, the last few years, not only the Trump era, but then COVID, there's just been some crazy shit happening in the world where misinformation, like people's saying, like, we got to stick to the science, is almost like a dirty word, like a phrase, right? It's just like, oh, you're one of those people. Whose science, right? I mean, and there's a real distrust of like scientific authority and peer reviewed. And now a lot of that distrust is well placed. I mean, there's just been some crazy shit happening. The FDA dropped the ball, CDC dropped the ball, like, but like that's the best we got. The best available balance of evidence in the peer reviewed medical literature, I mean, may not be great, and certainly there's lots of flaws, but it's the best we have. It's kind of like the gold standard. And so, yeah. So will the science win out? One can only hope. But as far as I'm concerned, look, it's your body, your choice. You want to, eat cheeseburgers and milkshakes all day. You want to go bungee jumping. You want to smoke a pack a day of cigarettes. You want to disconnect all the smoke alarms in your house. Go for it, right? But you should just understand the predictable consequences of your actions. As long as you do, then But it's the misinformation. It's the twisting the science. It's that's what gets me. And so that's what Nutrition Facts does. It's just like, well, we just need to let people know, and then they can make up their own mind. And we're never going to get there. I think we're at about 15% of Americans still smoke. They can't pretend that they don't know smoking isn't good for them. All right. So, okay, fine. I'm comfortable with the world, 15% are eating burgers. Right. But as long as people know, then, I'm retiring to a beach somewhere.
Yeah. I like it.
That brings me to something that I see not only in our industry a lot, but I think with, certain general practitioners and doctors, is the idea of not necessarily promoting a plant-based diet because of the idea that it's too hard for somebody to stick to, therefore I'm not going to give you the full information. Do you find that in I guess, given that, do you see a benefit to, like, well, let's get them 80% plant-based, but not really talk to them about 100% plant-based, versus the idea of, like, this is the best and then tear down from there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I talk to my medical colleagues, and say, like, well, about like the diet heart trial, like Dr. Dean Ornish's randomized controlled trial proving the reversal of heart disease, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, Ornish, God, it was published in like JAMA, it was published in Lancet, it was published in the most prestigious medical journals in the world. But they're like, yeah, but I can't even get my patients to stop smoking. Like, there's no way I'm gonna like bring up diet, right?
Yeah.
And that's just such a patronizing attitude. It's like, it's not your choice to make, dude, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you need to give people the information. And look, if they don't want to take it, then that's up to them. But not even giving them the chance to protect themselves and their families, I mean, that's just outrageous. So, I mean, it's really just about, but it's interesting. I mean, no one's really like debating the science. They just have this like really, kind of pessimistic view about human behavior change, which, look, I share. Look, a lot of people aren't, but it's like, that's not your choice to make, right?
Yeah.
You should give people the information, say, look, we can do drugs, we can do surgery, we can do this. Let's try this. It's totally up to you, but unfortunately, that's often not even presented as an option.
Yeah.
So that brings me, I think, to one of the main reasons why me and Chase want Whole Health Group to exist and want to expand. And I want to get your thoughts on where you think this may fit in the landscape, or especially being so involved with things like American College of Lifestyle Medicine, who are these doctors that are separating out from the system and trying to do something on their own, which is a lot more difficult professionally for them than going into the system. And do you feel that if these communities or these doctors had the support of a location, or were involved with a location where all we do is behavior change, and seeing these people 3 to 5 times a week inside of our facility that's continually talking about plant-based diets, do you think that would help doctors feel more confident to talk about this and get that behavior change? And 2, where do you see something like this fitting into the plant-based landscape?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask people what's the biggest barrier to remaining plant-based, what do they say? Lack of social support, right? Whether it's in their families or communities, in their kind of professional life, right? They just don't get that. And so that's what, going to an evidence-based gym could really do, is just give that constant feedback, surround yourself with like-minded people, and just like, and give that support that you might be lacking kind of your own little, in your professional life or personal life. And so, yeah, I mean, it's great to have books and websites and stuff, but there's just something about that face-to-face with people that, I think can really help people kind of stick to it. And, it's not what you eat today, tomorrow, next week. It's like, what are you going to eat the next few decades of your life? That's really what determines kind of on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why whatever it takes to get people to make this sustainable is really what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that. And after getting to be at the plant-based conference that you were just speaking at, it was really interesting hearing a lot of these physicians talk about that exact thing. Was, look, we have this information. We're all believers. We've seen our patients literally change their lives, in the matter of 30 days or less, if not shorter. And it seemed like that additional support of, how are we going to do this? And there's a lot of sweet digital resources out there that people can have these communities. And I think where me and Chase, we grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and we understood how valuable it is to have a place in your community where you can go with like-minded people and feel good, as it is very hard to day in and day out, walk direct against the grain of your entire community and the people around you. And so, we're just honored to be able to have somebody like you that's been doing what I call the dirty work of this, right? You've been doing the research and sifting through the difficult medical journals. And like, all I get to do is sit here and yell about the stuff you've already taught me, and kind of keep that momentum. And so, again, I just want to say, thank you for this time. And we really appreciate this conversation. And hopefully it's just one of many that we'll have, in the future, as both of our organizations, hopefully continue to thrive moving forward.
Look, all the research in the world is useless unless there's people in the trenches like you actually getting out there and helping people put it into practice. So keep up the good work. So honored to be here, and look forward to coming back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Greger. Have a great one.
Thank you.